Sometimes I get so mad, there's no controlling me. My thoughts get so bad, I'm like, I might grab a bat, I don't know. My wrath, my blood boils over like, oh God, here goes. I lost all feeling from my head to my toes. You said some shit that I can't let go, so just stay tuned for the rest of the show. So have you ever felt betrayed? Switches how you see things, realize something needs change. Cause I know you got me fucked up, let me show you what's up. Cause enough is enough. I'll take a face full of pavement just to make a statement. I know there's no turning back. Oh God, adrenaline wasted, so mad I can taste it. I know there's no turning back. I'll do what it takes, I ain't making mistakes like that. I'll put it on your face to make you go take it back. I'll lose my shit, I go crazy when I'm mad. And now you go wish you would shut the fuck up real bad. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. I don't fucking take smoke, I'ma poke a hole through you, choking's overdue. Come at me and you won't get any older, dude. Crack your holder too. Heating up inside of me, blood so violently. Thanks for trying me. Now it's finally time to see how this rivalry becomes a dynasty. I know there's no turning back. Oh God, adrenaline wasted, so mad I can taste it. I know there's no turning back. I'll do what it takes, I ain't making mistakes like that. I'll put it on your face to make you go take it back. I'll lose my shit, I go crazy when I'm mad. And now you go wish you would shut the fuck up real bad. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Let's go. I'm about to go off like a weapon. Fuel to the top, got a filled up engine. In my thoughts, obsession. I will not stop, no, I'm never second guessing. I got a God complex. Haters love to hate, but I never feel pressed. Got a lot on my plate, but I never get stressed.
Lori, do you love Chad?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I love you, babe. Hello, my good peoples. Hi, language. Hi, Amanda. How you been? Yo, where you been? I've been crazy, going crazy. I just got some things going on here on the home front. So I'll be here for a while, and then I won't be here, and it's going to be that type of thing. And on May 8th, I go in for the lung cancer thing. So hopefully that turns out well. Then I got some things going on with my kids. Then I got something else. You know what, people? I can't even begin to tell you. I don't know how I do all this shit. For real. It's only me. Me, one. There's one of me. One of me. It'll be fine. I wasn't fine like a week and a half ago. But I'm okay now. So have you guys been keeping track of this trial? I haven't like I wanted to because I've been gone. But I did the other day, and I seen a clip yesterday that I did a live on him crying in the courtroom, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. The 911 call about Tammy, bless her heart, R.I.P. Tammy. Justice is coming. Anyways, I did not feel sorry for him. He was crying. He's so fake. Crying in the courtroom. Did you cry for those little babies? that lives got taken. You demon. I have missed you too. So yeah, there's that. Grandma's gonna be here on and off. She's running some errands today. I should be starting here soon, I think. So, anyways, Amanda, language, have you been watching this faithfully, this trial? I see hardly anybody's in the courtroom. I mean, compared to Lori, but Lori, what made Lori so whatever is because of her behaviors and mannerisms, and yeah, she's that attention. She sucked that attention from people. Hey, and me too. Me too. That's why I do parodies. I see JLR is up to some crazy stuff. So I'm going to do something tonight, I hope, tonight about JLR. It's going to be funny. He's out there causing hell at the Karen Reed trial. Or Turtle Boys, actually. They are so slow. You know what? I would rather, tape this so we don't have to sit here and wait like this because I'm impatient. Okay? I bet you they only do a half day in court. Want to know why? Because they got the morning break for half an hour, then the lunch for an hour, and then another half hour, right? But in between those times, there's all these sidebars. And they don't even have the evidence right. They had 4 years. And plus already one trial, one conviction. So they really should know what they're doing by now. There's 4 of them. You see that? The state has 4 prosecutors. Little Johnny boy and Chatty. See, look at that. Look at that. I went and got coffee. They're still not on. And it is 9:36. 8:36 their time. Am I too early? I don't know. I'm not the only one. Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. And thank you for being here like always. What time is it there? Let's see. Let me guess. 1:30, 2:30, 3:30 p.m. Is it 3:30 p.m. your time? Amanda, did you see Chatty Boy crying in the courtroom? Did you see that? 13:36. Oh, 1:30. 1:30? Okay, I'm so confused. 13 would be 1:36, right? Using that military time on me? Oh, 3:37. Okay. Anything good been going on lately? Bad? Doesn't matter. Anything? You know, that's so funny. I think Grandma has said that before about her. I think Grandma. I could be wrong. Allegedly. Alleged. Okay. Like I said, she'll be popping in and out, I'm sure. You know, she's a caregiver to her parents, which is
All rise. District Court now in session. Honorable Stephen W. Boyce.
Oh
Judge
my God.
presiding.
Oh my God, Rice. Oh, Chad. There you
All
are.
right, thank you. Please be seated.
Oh, oh.
And Mr. Bader, if we can have the jurors brought in, please.
Okay, people, here we go.
All right, please. Here's our president for your honor.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, we are back on the record on Fremont County case CR 22-21-1623. Council's present as well as the defendant and defense counsel. The court will note that all 18 jurors are present and properly seated, and the court has reviewed and confirmed that all 18 jurors have signed their juror affirmation for the day. So thank you again for following the court's admonishment given to you at the end of each day. We're continuing with the case in chief of the state. I believe the state at this point is calling its next witness, and who's going to be conducting direct.
Your Honor, the state will be calling Brenda Dye and I'll be handling that.
All right, Mr. Wixom, then you can call your witness.
Swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
All right, now that the witness has been sworn, let me just inquire, because this trial is being live streamed and accessible to the public, I wanted to inquire on the court's exclusionary order. Ms. Dye, have you reviewed or watched any of the trial testimony that's taken place since the case started?
No.
Okay, and have you talked to anyone else about their testimony they've given in trial?
No.
Okay, with that affirmation, then I'll allow Mr. Wixom to commence with the direct, and I'll ask the witness, please talk right into the microphone so we make sure to pick up your words, and go ahead, Mr. Wixom.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Dye.
Good morning.
Will you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Brenda Dye, Brenda. Last name Dye, Dye.
Thank you. And ma'am, where do you live?
I live in Fremont County, Island Park, Idaho.
And what do you do for a living?
I am the Fremont County coroner, and I also work for Fremont County EMS as an EMT.
And to clarify that for the jury, as an EMS, are you trained in life-saving techniques?
Yes.
As an EMS, are you trained in autopsies or any of those kinds of things?
No.
How long have you been the coroner?
I took office in January of 2019.
So when you say that you took office, you're an elected position?
I am, yes.
When you took office at that time, did you receive any specialized training as to how to be a coroner?
Very limited training. I did attend a 2-day training in Boise. And then I attended probably a 4-day training in Las Vegas, Nevada in July of 2019.
Since that time, have you received other training as a coroner?
Yes.
What training have you received?
Every spring and fall training in Boise, here in Boise. And then every July, we have a training in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I've attended that every year since 2019.
Can you explain to the jury what is the primary function and role of a coroner in Idaho?
We respond to unattended deaths. We determine the cause of death. We make sure that our decedent gets to the proper funeral home. And then I sign off on the death certificate.
I want to back up and have you explain a little bit. Does Idaho have an ME system, a medical examiner system?
Yes, and here in Ada County, that's our closest facility to take our decedents for autopsy.
Typically in most counties in Idaho, do they have their own ME?
No.
I'd like you to kind of please explain what functions or things do you do to help determine a cause of death when you arrive at an unattended death?
We conduct an investigation. We look for weapons, we look for medications, we look for the family to give us information, health history about for their for the decedent.
And just for the jury's sake, from your perspective, how do you define an unattended death?
Death that is not someone who's not directly under a doctor's care.
And you just noted that one of the things you do is to look for weapons. Why do you do that?
To determine cause of death.
Why is identifying whether there's a weapon important in determining a cause of death?
If it was homicide, suicide, medications for natural health history.
What factors as a coroner do you look at when you determine whether or not to have an autopsy performed?
When we conduct our investigation, we usually have a detective on scene who helps us determine that. And usually if we cannot find a cause of death, and we don't do a lot of autopsies just because of my budget. It doesn't allow for us to do a lot of autopsies, and we have to come over to Ada County and transport the body over here if we deem it necessary for an autopsy.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to define for the jury some terms that you might typically use as a coroner. Are you familiar with the term lividity? Can you explain to the jury what that word means?
Judge, could I have some foundation as to how she knows about lividity?
Mr. Wixom?
Ma'am, how do you know what the word lividity means?
My training and my EMS training for years.
Will you please go ahead and explain to the jury what that word means?
Yes, it's the lowest point of the body that the blood pools when somebody is no longer living, and it pulls at the lowest point in the body, and it looks like a bruise. It looks like a red.
Help the jury understand, how does identifying whether or not there's lividity help you in your role as a coroner?
It helps me to know how the body was found, how the body, the position of the body at the time of death.
Why is that important for you?
To know if the body was moved. That's the most important, is to know if someone has moved the body or not.
Perhaps maybe this is more of a common term, but can you explain to the jury your understanding of the definition of rigor mortis?
Rigor mortis is stiffening of the body. It normally occurs 2 to 6 hours after the time of death, and then it releases after about 8 hours approximately.
And why is identifying rigor mortis important to your role as a coroner?
To determine the time of death.
In addition to rigor mortis, are there other things that you look at to determine time of death?
Yes, we can look at lividity, rigor mortis, the temperature of the body. A lot of times, well, the abdominal cavity is the last part of the body to lose its warmth. So if somebody is cold to the touch on the abdomen, they have been deceased for quite a while.
And then when you are responding to an unattended death and are making a determination if an autopsy is necessary, what other factors besides those mentioned do you look at or consider to determine if an autopsy is appropriate?
I think for a minute. Part of our investigation when we when we cannot determine a cause of death, or if it is a homicide, then we do autopsies. Child deaths, we normally do autopsies.
I want to draw your attention back to October 19th of 2019. Do you recall responding to an unattended death for a Tammy Daybell?
Yes,
And prior to responding to that, had you ever heard Tammy Daybell's name?
no,
You didn't know her in any way?
No.
What about her husband, Chad Daybell? Were you familiar with him at all?
no,
Any of the Daybell family members that you were acquainted with or knew in any way?
no.
So can you explain to the jury when you responded to that unattended death, how did you receive that call or that request to come?
I was on the ambulance for my other job, and we were returning from an ambulance call from the hospital, and I received a call from our dispatch that there was an unattended death that I needed to respond to.
Is that the norm? Dispatch will call you?
Yes,
And the best you can recall, what time of day did you receive that call?
it was early morning.
And did you respond immediately?
I got there as quickly as I could. I had the ambulance drop me off on my way back through.
When you say the ambulance dropped you off, were you hurt or were you working otherwise?
No, I was working.
How long approximately did it take for you to arrive on scene for the time you got the initial call?
Approximately 45 minutes.
And prior to arrival, did you talk to anybody else about helping you with this?
Yes, I called my deputy coroner, Wilmore. She's about 10 minutes away from where the deceased was. And dispatch had called me a few times to request my estimated time of arrival because the decedent's husband was very distraught, very upset, crying. And so I had my deputy go and start the investigation until I showed up.
Are you aware, was anybody else dispatched or sent to the scene?
Yes, we had Officer Greenhalgh there.
So at the time that you arrived, had Officer Greenhalgh and Deputy Coroner Wilmore already arrived?
Yes.
So I want you to tell the jury, what's the first thing that you observed when you arrived on scene?
I observed Chad, the husband, very distraught, very upset, walking around. And his son was on scene also with him, Garth. Chad was very distraught. Garth was emotionless to me.
And for the jury's sake, can you describe your recollection of the layout of the home when you first arrived there?
I walked into the kitchen, and there I met with Officer Greenhalgh and Deputy Wilmore, and they kind of filled me in on what they had done, what they had seen.
And then at some point, did you go in and observe Tammy Daybell's body?
Yes, I did.
And how did you get there?
I walked through the kitchen, down the hall into the back bedroom.
Who took you into the bedroom?
I believe Officer Greenhalgh and Deputy Wilmore.
And at some point, did you engage Chad Daybell in any conversation or discussion?
Yes.
When did you
Okay.
do that?
After I looked at the body, I questioned Chad about Tammy's health, her past health history.
Your Honor, at this time, rather than republishing this exhibit, I would ask to have the witness provided the state's exhibit 295B is in David.
Okay.
And it was published yesterday to the jury. Ma'am, for the record, what are you holding in your hand?
I'm holding a picture of Tammy,
Yeah.
deceased on the bed.
In looking at that photo, on the back of it, is there a mark on it?
The exhibit.
Yes, ma'am. Do you see that?
Yes.
Will you just note for the record what number that is?
295D.
Thank you. Now flipping it back over and looking at it, just, can you confirm for the jury, is what you see in that picture the same position that Tammy's body was in when you first walked into the room and observed her?
Yes.
What did you first observe about her body when you first went in and looked at her?
I observed the blood tinged sputum coming from her mouth. Kind of a foam, a pink foam. She was wrapped in a blanket. I asked if that is the position she was in when she was found, and Chad told me no, she was hanging half off the bed with her face and head towards the floor on her left side. When he discovered she was deceased, he called for Garth to help him, whose bedroom is across the hall, and they picked her up off the floor and put her on the bed and covered her with a blanket.
At that moment in time, when you were observing her, did you do anything to physically check her or touch her?
Yes, I did.
What did you do?
Looked at the body. We always look at the body and know any injuries, any signs of struggle, anything. I did observe rigor mortis had set in, lividity on the back side. So her back, her bottom, her legs, the back of her legs as she was laying. And then I also noted that she was cold to the touch. Her abdomen was cold. So
When you just noted that you observed lividity, did you make that observation at that moment in time, or did you examine her body? At what point did you identify what you thought was lividity?
at that point, when I examined her body, I saw the lividity.
What, if anything, let me withdraw that. Did you just tell us, did you observe lividity on her body?
Yes,
And what, if anything, did that lividity tell you?
that she died on her back.
Did you observe anything else in the room at the time?
Yes, there was a kitchen towel to the side of the bed. And it had the pink blood tinged sputum on it. And I asked Chad if he had used that towel. He said yes, that he had used that towel to wipe her face.
And you were starting to explain to the jury, Chad gave you an accounting of how he discovered her.
Yes, he said that he felt her body roll off the bed, and that's what awakened him. And just because of the rigor mortis, lividity, the coldness of her body, I asked how that was possible if she had been gone that long. And he said it may have been from him pulling on the sheets and releasing her body as it fell. He stated that she was going through menopause and she had hot flashes, and she liked to sleep with her feet outside the covers and on the edge of the bed.
What triggered you to inquire how that is possible, or his account of how the body fell? Why did you question that?
Because if someone's dead, they can't roll out of bed. So I was trying to understand how that woke him up when somebody is dead, they can't move.
Did his explanation make sense to you?
The explanation of maybe him pulling on the sheet or the blanket released her body. But looking back on it, no.
Why, looking back on it, does it not make sense to you?
It would take a lot of force to roll a body out of bed.
So I'll move on. What else, if anything, did Chad tell you at that time about Tammy?
Chad stated that Tammy had been feeling really off for the past few months. He stated that she had told him she felt outside of her body, not normal. He told me that she had been having fainting spells. And one occasion he said they were at the temple and she was kneeling at the altar. And when she went to stand up, she fainted. He said she had extremely low blood pressure, but she did not seek medical attention for that from a doctor. He said she did not like going to the doctor, and she would try to treat everything natural. There was a lot of natural supplements and oils in the kitchen cupboard when we were looking for medications, and also a natural remedy book on her side table in the bedroom.
I want to take you back. You said that Chad indicated to you that Tammy had a low blood pressure problem,
Yes.
but she wouldn't go to the doctor about that.
Yes, he said that she tested it like on a Walmart or Walgreens blood pressure machine.
Did Chad give you any accounting of the timing of the night before and kind of how he perceived Tammy?
Yes, he said about 12:30 she was having a coughing fit and she vomited in the bathroom. He helped her back to bed. She said she was okay, and then he went to sleep.
Did he ever identify for you what time it was that he claimed he was woken up by her falling?
Approximately 12. Oh, her falling out of bed.
Yes.
I think it was just before 6 a.m. in the morning.
You indicated that there were some, I think you talked about supplements or oils that were found in the home.
Yes.
And did anybody tell you whether or not those were things that Tammy was using?
Yes,
Who told you that?
Chad,
What did he say about that specifically?
that she liked to try and treat everything naturally and not go to the doctor. But we did find a prescription for fluoxetine. And Garth admitted that he was sharing that with his mom for his depression, anxiety.
Did you identify any other prescribed medications in the home?
Just the fluoxetine and then over-the-counter medications and the natural supplements.
You mentioned earlier that Chad had said that Tammy had been feeling out of her body.
Yes.
Your experience as a coroner, is that a common way or a common symptom for someone to describe?
Judge calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Could you repeat it? Sorry.
In your experience, is saying that I feel out of my body a common thing for someone to describe as a symptom?
It can be, yes.
What did you take that to mean and how did that play into your assessment?
With the low blood pressure, with the fainting spells. And also he did say that she had a fall a month or two prior to this day, and she hurt her wrist. She did go to the doctor for that because she was afraid it was broke. And the doctor did prescribe tramadol for that. There was no tramadol found on scene. He stated that she had taken the prescription as prescribed.
Now, I want to be clear, as a coroner, you're not a medical doctor.
No.
Are MEs medical doctors?
Yes.
At the time you were on scene, besides identifying the supplements or the fluoxetine,
Yes.
did you have access to any medical records for Tammy?
No, those we have to request from the doctor and it can take up 2 weeks to receive those.
So at that time, I'll withdraw that. At that point in time, approximately how many unattended deaths had you responded to?
It was my first year being in office, so under 10.
And now, on average, how many unattended deaths do you respond to?
It could be 20 to 50 a year.
And ultimately, did you determine what you believed was the time of death for Tammy?
We estimated the time of death. If we don't have an exact time, then we do an estimation of when she was last seen alive and when we get the call. And then lividity, rigor mortis, and the temperature of the body also plays into that.
And ultimately, do you determine a cause of death? And are you the one who signs a death certificate?
Yes,
And did you do that in this case?
yes.
What did you determine the cause of death for Tammy was initially?
I determined it was pulmonary edema
Will you explain that to the jury?
due
What
to
that
a
means?
cardiac event. So pulmonary edema is the backup of fluid, blood in the lungs. And where he told me she had low blood pressure and the fainting spells, that can play into that part. And also, I asked about any seizure-like activity because of the foam in the mouth. Chad did tell me that she did have shaking fits when she would faint. So her legs would shake and she would convulse.
And how did you factor that into your determination of cause of death, that accounting from Chad about shaking fits?
Seizure-like activity.
And what led you to, you mentioned a second ago that you had included in your potential cause of death a heart attack. What led you to include that?
A cardiac event just because of the extremely low blood pressure and the fainting, which if your blood pressure does drop really low, it does make you faint.
Now, as a coroner, do you make a decision about an autopsy based upon a family's wishes?
No.
Is that something you consider though?
Ultimately, the decision is up to me. If I deem one necessary, then I do it, regardless of family's wishes.
In this instance, did you have a discussion with Chad or with the family about their feelings about an autopsy?
I did mention it. Chad didn't seem to want it or not want it. But Emma was on scene, Chad's daughter, and she really didn't want her mom to have an autopsy. It's pretty extensive, and she didn't want her mom's body to have to go through that.
So understanding that you make the shots in the call, do you still as a factor at least consider what the family is telling you about their wishes?
If I deem it necessary, then I do order an autopsy. If I do not deem it necessary and the family requests an autopsy, then they're responsible to pay for that autopsy.
Now, have you recently made any amendments to the death certificate?
Yes.
And what have you done with that?
The manner of death was changed to homicide. The cause of death was changed to asphyxiation by suffocation.
Can you explain to the jury, why did you make that change?
Tammy's body was exhumed and a medical examiner from Utah autopsied her body. She had a very deep,
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. She's calling to make conclusions that she doesn't have any foundation or we don't have any foundation to suggest she's qualified to make. And in addition, she's going to be reciting what another medical examiner may or may not have said.
All right, on lack of foundation, I'll sustain the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, you mentioned that there was an autopsy performed.
yes,
Did you attend that autopsy?
yes,
Were you present for the beginning to end of the autopsy?
yes,
As you were there, were you standing there with the ME performing the autopsy?
yes,
Was the ME explaining as performing the autopsy what they were seeing?
yes,
As a 20-year veteran as an EMS, were you understanding the terms and things that were being explained to you from the
yes,
ME?
yes.
So then I'd like you to please go ahead with what you were explaining to us about.
Judge, and I'm going to renew my objection. At this point, it's relying on hearsay to make a determination of what someone else may have said about what they think they may or may not have found.
It's overruled.
Go ahead, please, ma'am.
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
I was asking you to please explain what you were observing during the autopsy that helped cause you to change your mind about the cause of death.
As they were dissecting the bruise, it was a very deep bruise on her arm. It didn't make sense that she had thrown up the night before because she still had stomach contents.
I pause you, please.
Yes,
Explain that to the jury, please.
so her stomach was full of food. If she threw up, there wouldn't be food in her stomach during the autopsy. I was gonna say, so I'm the one that signs the death certificate. I'm the one that makes that determination. I do, if we do an autopsy on a body, I do take the medical examiner's words advice. Not a doctor, they're a doctor. When they do the autopsy, then it helps me figure out the cause of death.
You'd explained earlier that one of the bases for your original determination was seizures. What did you learn from the autopsy about that factor or that aspect of Tammy?
All of Tammy's organs were very healthy. There was nothing in the brain. The heart was healthy. The only organ that was not healthy were the lungs. When they were dissected, there was still foam, a lot of foam in the lungs.
How did that impact your decision to change the death certificate?
There shouldn't have been that foam in the lungs still. It was 2 months before she was exhumed and then autopsy was done.
Is there anything else besides the autopsy that has impacted your decision to change the amended death certificate?
Yes.
What other things?
I received a call from the Arizona police. They wanted all of my coroner records. There had been a death in Arizona, and Chad's name was brought up. And there was also an attempt. And when I heard all those names and the investigation that was going on, and then it did change my mind. If I had known that information, it would have been
Who were
different.
the names that had been brought up?
Lori
Judge.
Ballo,
I'll withdraw. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Lori Ballo, Alex Cox, Chad Daybell.
You mentioned the word attempt. What did you mean by that?
An attempt for Lori's niece's husband, attempt a shooting.
At the time that you made your original determination, had you heard the name JJ Vallow or Tylee Ryan?
No,
Did information related to those names also impact your decision to amend the death certificate?
yes.
As you sit there today, do you have any regrets about your original decision?
Yes.
What are those regrets?
So, had I known that information, I would have ordered an autopsy. At that time, with my limited training and being new, I did the best I could with what training I had at that time.
Thank you, ma'am. Your Honor, I have no more questions at this time.
All right. Cross-examination?
Judge, before we start, I have exhibit 19 and 20. If I could provide those to the bailiff to have those marked. My understanding is 19 and 20 are admitted by way of stipulation of the parties.
Okay, have they? And what are those, Mr. Pryor?
Those are a death, 20 is a death certificate, 19 are pictures. And Judge, we'll have a sidebar prior to going forward with the pictures, if that's acceptable to the
All right,
board.
how many pictures have you got in?
It's going to be one, there are a number of pictures, A through I think K, but specifically it's going to be F that I think I'm going to be looking at. But I'll request a sidebar before we go down that road, Judge.
Okay,
Your Honor, for my benefit, could I just ask counsel to refresh me what these photos are of? Are they of Tammy's death scene?
Correct.
Thank you.
And Judge, there may be some overlap with what the state had admitted as well previously, so.
sounds like we have a defense exhibit 20 that's already been admitted. Is that-
They may already be on there.
Okay, so the death certificate exhibit 20 has previously been admitted.
I didn't have a recollection of that, Judge. My notes didn't reflect that. I apologize.
All right, thank you. So you can, yeah, if you can start there, and when we get to the pictures, if we have exhibits not yet admitted, we'll take those up in turn.
All right. And Judge, whenever I can go forward.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you.
Do that.
So, and how would you like me to address you? Miss Dye or Coroner Dye? Miss Dye is okay? Okay.
Yep.
Miss Dye, you had an occasion to discuss this case with the FBI. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And that discussion took place at the Rexburg Police Department?
yes,
Okay. And as part of that discussion with the FBI, you had mentioned that you had worked for EMS for 20 years,
yes.
that you were an EMT for 5 years and an advanced EMT for 15. Is that still accurate?
That was in 2019, so
You have even more experience now.
I have more experience now, yes.
So when you're talking about an EMT and an advanced EMT, an advanced EMT is someone who is qualified to give medication. Is that right?
Certain medication, yes.
And there's also additional training as well, identifying medical emergencies. But in addition, there's also some training as it relates to death scene investigation. Is there not?
Yes,
And for 20 years, you had experience doing that, right?
my main concern as an EMT is to save lives.
I understand that, but if the life can't be saved, you're still as an EMT for 20 years, given a significant amount of training about the death scene investigation, are you not?
If we can't save the patient before I was coroner, then no, I didn't. We would leave the scene.
Okay. Now, when you spoke with the FBI, um, your testimony with the prosecuting attorney is you said something about taking a 2-day seminar, is that right? Some sort of
In
2-day training?
Boise, in Boise, yes.
And then you said there was some other classes or some other issues, right? That you
Uh,
took?
There's a week-long conference and it's about 4 days, but yes, it's a week long
Yeah.
in Las Vegas, Nevada,
And that's
every
what I was
year.
curious about, because you mentioned something about something else, but when you talked to the FBI, you described it as a week-long conference with the FBI as part of your training, right?
Right,
Is that right?
yes.
Okay. And what areas did that cover as part of that week-long conference?
Um, Causes of death, times of death. um, It covers a wide variety.
It's an extensive course,
Yes, it was my first time attending
and
too.
and is it required as part of being a coroner? Isn't that one of the requirements that you have to go through that training in order to be either elected or appointed as a coroner of a county?
Yes,
And you have to get this extensive training because we're not dealing with a minor issue. We're dealing with making a significant determination of the cause of death of somebody, aren't we? Ma'am?
yes,
Okay. And are you familiar with Title 19, Chapter 43 of the Idaho Code?
I don't recall.
Judge, would there be something that could refresh your recollection if I showed you something?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, if you wouldn't take time to just read that, I'm not having it marked, just read right there. You could read that, take the time to read that, and then when you're done, hand it back to the bailiff, and then we'll talk a little bit about it.
What statute are you having her review, Mr. Pryor?
1943-01, Judge. I have another copy. If I would like, I could provide it to the court.
Fine, I have it.
Thank you. Now, you've read Title 19, Chapter 43 of 01 of the Idaho Code. Is that
Objection, Your Honor.
Grounds?
Your Honor, this witness is not qualified to give she has no legal expertise to be interpreting statutes for the jury.
Well, if it calls for a legal conclusion, I'll sustain it, but I don't know what the question is yet, so overruled for now.
Now, ma'am, did you have an occasion to read that as part of your responsibilities of becoming a coroner?
When I first took over as coroner, yes.
Right. So you're aware that your primary job as a coroner under this particular legal statute of the law is um, when a county coroner is informed that
Objection, Your Honor. This is calling for a legal conclusion.
it's not, Judge.
Overruled.
When a county coroner is informed that a person has died, the county coroner shall investigate the death. You read that first line, right? You're aware of that, right?
Yes,
You are under a legal obligation under the law as part of your position to investigate any death, correct?
yes,
And if that death was suspicious or unknown circumstances, that's sub B, or the death occurred as a result of violence, whether by homicide, suicide, accident, you are required to investigate, correct?
correct.
Okay. And then as a result, if you determine that there's an issue, you can require an inquest to be conducted, which is basically like a jury trial, right? You understand that?
Yes,
Okay. And you are also to notify the police if you have any, before even doing an inquest, if you have any concerns under the statute that there's anything suspicious or out of the ordinary, you are to notify the police department and ask them to conduct an investigation. You understand that as well?
yes, and we did have an officer on scene that helped investigate this. And we have an officer respond to every death call that helps investigate.
And I appreciate that, ma'am. But in talking to the prosecutor, you talked about, well, the lapidity caused me some concern. Remember you said that about lapidity, that was a concern of yours and your questions weren't answered, right? Well, at the time of the scene there, you said, you noticed lapidity in the body, that Tammy Daybell apparently had died on her back, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Was that of a concern of yours at the time that would cause you to say, maybe I ought to take a step back before I sign this death certificate?
At that time, no.
Okay, but you were fully aware of the lapidity that you're claiming had occurred at that point. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. There were no fresh bruises on Tammy Daybell's body anywhere, were there?
on her arm, yes.
Those were fresh bruises?
I don't know. I'm not qualified to
Well, you did
take that.
you did a report in that regard, did you not?
I did, and it looked like an old bruise to me and with,
That's, we'll get to that.
okay,
So when you filled out your medical report, you specifically not only identified that she had bruises on her arm, you actually used the word old bruises. Do you remember that?
yes, I did.
Okay. And these were not fresh or red or irritated or anything like that, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. The witness has already indicated she's not qualified to determine that.
Well, based on our observations, all overruled.
These weren't fresh bruises, were they, on her arms? These were old bruises, just like what your report says, correct?
I can't answer that.
Okay. But you will answer that on your report, when you decided to fill out a report relating to this case, that report said old bruises. When the picture of the body, you wrote on the arms, old bruises on the arms, right?
Yes,
No other bruises on her body anywhere else, right?
no,
Nothing else that would deem to be suspicious on her body, correct?
no,
And in fact, there was no indication of any trauma to the neck that you could observe, right?
no,
There were no scratch marks on her hands that would indicate any kind of a struggle, correct?
no,
There was no irritation on her ears or her face or her head that would give you any indication that there was any kind of a struggle. Is that right?
yes,
When you arrived, Chad Daybell was distraught, wasn't he?
yes,
Sobbing.
yes,
And you noted that it was his son that was not upset. His son was, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say his son was reserved,
yes,
quiet?
yes,
And in the FBI report, you mentioned that you think that maybe his son was in shock. Remember that?
yes,
Okay, and it's still your assessment at this point that at the time you felt that his son Garth was in shock. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. You went over to the nightstand. And on Tammy's side of the bed, you found the essential oils, right?
the book,
The what?
the book
The book.
of essential oils of natural.
Did you see any, I would represent you that Officer Greenow testified that she found a number of items in the bedroom. And you also saw cough medicine on Tammy's side. Is that right?
I don't recall the cough medicine being in the bedroom.
Okay, what about the medication for strike? What about the medication for bruises that she had, that was in the bedroom as well? Do you recall that?
No,
Okay, but if Officer Greenow, and Officer Greenow was there, right?
yes, she
And
was.
detailed that in her report, correct? Correct?
I don't recall.
Okay, would it help you to review Officer Greenow's report?
Yes,
Judge, if I could just have a moment.
You may.
And Judge, I think while I'm waiting for this to load, I'll continue with some questions so we don't waste any time. If it loads. So back to I think where we left off is that Garth was, in your opinion, was in shock at the death of his mother, correct?
correct.
And Chad Daybell throughout this episode of being there with Tammy, for the most part, was sobbing and was highly emotional almost the entire time. Is that fair?
Yes,
There was no instance where you saw that he was faking it or trying to pretend to be upset. This was a genuine situation where you truly believed he was upset about the death of his wife. Is that right?
Objection, speculation, Your Honor.
Overruled.
You can answer.
yes,
Now, I appreciate you talking about it, and you mentioned it in the report that at no time did the family ever try to prevent you from doing an autopsy in this case. Is that right?
Emma stated she didn't want one done, but
Okay.
it's my choice, ultimately my
Right.
choice. Yes,
Emma didn't want one done because she didn't want her mother cut up, right?
correct. Yes,
She didn't want her mother subjected to being, she didn't want her mother treated that way as part of the examination. Is that what her primary and only concern was?
yes,
Okay. And yet Chad was indifferent one way or the other. He didn't tell you one way or the other whether he wanted one or didn't want one. Isn't that true?
yes,
And ultimately, it's not the family's decision whether this occurs. It's your decision whether this occurs. Is that right?
yes,
And based on the facts as you saw them, you saw some old bruises that you identified in your report, right? Correct?
bruises.
There were no other indications of a struggle or a fight as it related to Tammy Daybell's body. Is that right?
No, not that I noticed. No,
Okay. No other indication right up to the time you dropped her off at the morgue that there was any problem with Tammy's body in any way, correct?
explain problem.
Well, you didn't see anything as part of when you arrived to the time that you loaded her up and took her off to the morgue, there was never anything during that process that would indicate there was anything wrong with Tammy Daybell's body, right?
I don't know what you're asking me.
Okay.
I can't answer that question.
Okay, how about this? There's nothing suspicious that you noted other than the lapidity and the old bruises that you put in your medical report, correct?
Correct.
Judge, at this point, I've got the report of his Officer Greenow. With the court's permission, I could give it to the bailiff. He could take it to her and she could scroll through. I think that would protect in terms of being able to refresh your recollection about the report, if that's acceptable to the court.
All right, I'll let the prosecutor take a look at that first before it goes to the witness to make sure it's appropriately identified.
Oh, it's okay. See? And then it has. And I could have printed it off. I just-
Mr. Pryor, we've got that report also admitted as an exhibit, if that's
That
easier.
was also, maybe I missed it, but I didn't have that marked down, and if the court wants to, I don't, either way, Judge, either we can,
I'd prefer the exhibit to your computer.
all right.
States Exhibit 418.
It doesn't work that way. I'm an idiot when it comes to electronics. Oh, thank you. And ma'am, after you've had a chance to review that, would you look up and then just hand that back to the bailiff?
Your Honor, while the witness is reviewing, may we have a quick sidebar?
Well, let's have the witness finish the review and then we'll have a quick sidebar.
Got it under, I have it under, I think 19 or one of these I have it under, and I'm gonna move to admit the entire. Yeah. I think the whole thing is. No, there's like 4 pages there in the whole thing. So. Yeah, oh no, that's okay. We can just correct that. I don't have a problem with that. And if you want stipulation, do you want to read over this so you know what's in the whole thing? Well, no, just use the up and down thing and you can start and.
Okay, in her,
Get it back to the bailiff and judge for. Counsel, may I have a look at that, Mr. Bailiff, please?
Yeah, and that's Exhibit 418 that council's reviewing.
You're right. It's only 2. Judge, we may have to have a sidebar just very briefly. Would that be possible?
Yes, that's fine.
Want to look at the rest of it or? Okay. Okay.
All right, so after a sidebar, we've determined we do need to take a little bit of time to get an exhibit prepared, which we're working on at this time. And we will take the mid-morning recess to allow that to occur while we're on break. So we'll take our break here, plan on a 30-minute break to come back on at 10:15.
All right, please. Court's again in session.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, we can have the drop back, please.
All right, please. Please offer the counter for you.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, we're back on the record. CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Completed our morning break. Maybe to help move things forward here, Mr. Pryor, I'll note that we have now defendants exhibit 19, which is the entire report of Officer Greenhalgh, including attached photographs. And I believe that's been offered and will be admitted by stipulation. Is that your understanding?
It is, Judge, and that's 19. Is that right, Judge?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Wixom from the state, does the state stipulate to the admission of exhibit 19, which is the entire report, including statements and photographs?
We do, Your Honor.
Okay, that'll be admitted then as a single exhibit. And you can proceed with your continuing cross, Mr. Pryor.
Now, Ms. Dye, as part of your activities on the scene at Miss Daybell's death, you eventually went back and did a chart or a report as it related to this case. Do you recall that? And part of that is to do a body chart and identify things of significance on that body chart. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay, and you in fact did that. Did you recall that?
yes.
If I were to provide you with a copy of the chart, would you recognize that chart? If I could have the bailiff approach the witness? Thank you, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I showed it to you. Okay. And do you recognize those documents?
Mhm.
Are those the documents that you prepared after your examination of Tammy Daybell?
Yes,
And the date of those are 10/20/14, is that right?
yes, that's the date the report was
Okay.
completed.
And those are true and accurate copies of what you prepared as a result of your examination of Tammy Daybell on the date of her death. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, Judge, I'm going to move for admission of defendant's exhibit, and I would like it to be marked E and F, Judge. I think it's consistent with A, B, and C.
E and F,
E and F, 89 E and F.
89 E and F.
Yes, Judge. And I think that was how it was previously disclosed to the state on my exhibits.
Any objection to exhibits 89 E and F?
No, Your Honor.
All right, defense exhibits 89 E and 89 F are admitted. And again, two separate exhibits there, Mr. Pryor. It's a body chart in that
Two body charts, Judge.
two body charge. Thank
Do
you.
you want to have that marked now, Judge, or how do you want to handle that?
I'll grab them.
I'll have the clerk mark that actually, so we keep it straight.
You're getting your mileage in today. Sorry. You're walking tonight.
Yeah. So to be clear then, Mr. Pryor, the top, there's two pages here. The top page you gave me will be E and the bottom page will be F.
Yes, Judge.
Okay.
Now, ma'am, you've had may I proceed, Judge?
You may.
You've had a chance to look at what's been marked Exhibit 89E and 89F. Is that correct?
Yes.
And based on the time that you spent at Mr. Daybell's residence observing Tammy, this is a true and accurate reflection of what you observed on that day, correct?
Correct.
And there, at this point, there's no changes that you would make or anything that you would modify in regards to this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, Judge, could I publish this?
Yes. There's a light on that device, Mr. Pryor, that'll help with the shadow.
Thank you. Okay. So on your, and let me know when you're ready, ma'am.
Yeah, go ahead.
On your left, when you're looking at the screen, and it's the face down figure, up on the arm, we have a term. What is that term?
Lividity.
And blood had gathered there. Is that right? That's what that means?
Yes.
Okay, and then a little further to the right on the same figure, there's another word that, what is that word?
Lividity.
And then to the left again on the same figure down near the lower part of the back, there's another word.
Lividity.
And then down on the legs, there's another term. What's that term?
Lividity.
So from what I gather from this, there was lividity on her entire body. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. So we weren't able with lividity, you aren't able to really make a determination other than the fact that she was laying flat at some point, right?
Yes.
Or she was laying on her front, one way or the other, right?
On her back.
Okay. So in your report, when you discussed this with the FBI, you had, based on all of your experience, you had said that the body had been dead for about 5 to 6 hours. Do you recall telling the FBI that?
Approximately, yes.
Okay, well, you said 5 to 6 hours. So that's what you testified to the FBI. Is that incorrect?
No.
Okay. So I guess the question is that Mr. Daybell mentioned that he was awoken by the fact that Tammy had slipped out of the bed when he pulled the covers. You recall that?
Yes.
And Tammy had fallen down and her head was on the floor and her leg was up on the bed. You recall that?
That's what I was told, yes.
Okay. So if Tammy had died in the bed and had passed away in the bed, this lividity would be consistent with her dying in bed on her back, right?
Yes.
And if she fell down, and that's what woke Mr. Daybell up, there wouldn't be lividity up in her head, would there?
No.
So when Mr. Daybell told you that he was awoken when he pulled the covers, rolled over, and Tammy slid off the bed, well, that's consistent with the lividity here. She was in bed. She died in bed. And when he pulled the covers, she slid off. So wouldn't his story be consistent with the lividity findings that she actually was in bed for 5 or 6 hours?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now I want to go over to the other side and the one that's facing. And on that particular one, it says something about tinged foam. Could you read that for me?
Blood tinged foam.
Okay, and that's what you observed on her body was and we saw the pictures of the blood tinged foam in her mouth, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then further down on what would be her right arm, you put a word, two words there, and what are those words?
Old bruising. Old bruising.
Okay, so old bruising. Now, you didn't put new bruising, did you?
No,
You didn't put any marks on anywhere else on her body, right?
no.
And as part of your investigation, you by statute are required to do a thorough investigation of the body. Is that right?
Yes.
And you did that day, didn't you?
Yes.
And what you came up with is that she had some foam in her mouth and there were some old bruises on her right arm. That's what you came up with, right?
Yes.
And you came up with nothing else on her body that showed any indication of any other trauma, marks.
No.
We can take that one down. I'm done with that. And Judge, at this time, I'm going to want to publish defense, like it's Defense Exhibit 19, I believe.
All right. Give me a moment.
19F, Judge, I'm sorry. And Judge, this is the one where we counsel. Sorry. This is just. Mr. Bailiff, would. We already have it. I'll clarify that. Just mark that whole. All right, again, Mr. Pryor, the way we're admitting and have admitted Exhibit 19 is just a single exhibit. So you can reference photographs contained within 19. They're not going to be given separate designations. So 19F is not going to be an exhibit. So you'll have to refer to it by, I guess, page number, because that's the way it came in as one document. We're not going to have the sub documents in 19. It's just one exhibit. And Judge, unfortunately, there are not page numbers on these.
Okay, well, if you,
I can identify it as,
you can describe it or count through the pages, but
Okay.
it's one single exhibit.
and Judge, this page number is a photo of Tammy Daybell's right arm showing some discoloration.
Okay, and we've got the original exhibit here that's getting processed. We'll get that over to you here shortly. And you can publish off that courts.
Judge, I've also got it on my screen. Could we do that by HDMI?
You could do that as well if that's a
So
accurate.
would you approach and look at this to see that it's a true and accurate same one, right? Judge, counsel has acknowledged it's the same picture.
Okay, as long as it corresponds with the actual exhibit, Exhibit 19 is admitted. It's the paper document of the entire report with the pictures. If you want to select one of the pictures to publish, we'll do that. I understand this is also a photograph, death scene photograph. The court's not going to publish to the public. It's going to be published to the jurors and the parties only based on a graphic content.
Your Honor, may I have permission to stand here during this part of the cross-examination so I can have a vantage point for the screen?
You may.
Oh, it's up there. magic. So ma'am, you're looking at what's part of 19, Exhibit 19. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
And the old bruises that you were talking about, are those reflected on the two what look to be discolored marks on Tammy Daybell's arm?
yes,
And that's what you saw on that day, correct?
yes,
And those are the old bruises that you talked about that you identified on her body on that day, correct?
yes.
Okay, Judge, that's all I have at this point with this.
All right.
So you testified earlier and you used the words, if I don't deem it necessary. If I don't deem it necessary that an autopsy is done, it's my decision alone to decide whether an autopsy is done, correct?
Um,
Your decision alone to decide whether an autopsy is done, correct?
it's ultimately my decision.
Right.
Yes.
And you looked at these old bruises that you identified, correct?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And you looked at the foam coming from the mouth, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I didn't see any other marks or any other indication of anything other than the lividity that you talked about, correct?
Correct.
And based on that, you then issued a death certificate, right?
Yes.
Now, before you issue a death certificate, you have an obligation, do you not? Before you issue and sign that death certificate? Are you aware of your obligation?
Yes.
Okay, and that obligation is that you want to attest, but when you put your signature down on that death certificate, you want to be sure that what you're signing is true and accurate to the best of your ability based on the information you have at the time of the death. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, the death certificate, and Judge, um, I'm not going to publish Exhibit 20, but Exhibit 20 reflects that death certificate. You talked about pulmonary edema, and then there was another cause for this, right? Another reason why you cited her, two things that you cited as part of what you felt was her death, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you did talk to Chad, and he talked to you about the fact that Tammany vomited the night before, correct?
Yes.
And you had mentioned about the stomach. Was that stomach completely full?
No, not completely.
Right. And were you aware, when you were there, did you talk to Garth about the fact that he bought Tammy a quarter pounder and some French fries that night? Did you discuss that with Garth?
No.
Okay. But when you went through the autopsy, you found potatoes in her stomach, right?
I didn't identify it.
Okay.
I just saw the stomach contents.
Okay, but you weren't able to identify that there were potatoes in her stomach.
I didn't know what it was.
And you didn't identify the fact that there was any sight of a quarter pounder or anything like that, correct?
No.
Okay. So when you said that you found it unusual that her stomach was full, it wasn't really full. It just had contents in it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So we really don't know whether Tammy Daybell threw up that night, other than the fact that Chad said she did, right?
Right.
And when you showed up, Chad Daybell is sobbing, he's crying, and he's telling you how his wife threw up the night before, correct?
Yes.
Went to sleep, and she fell off the bed. And based on the lividity, his story is consistent with what the lividity findings you had, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you also had an opportunity to look at Officer Greenall's report, correct?
Yes.
And you saw that the number of medications that Tammy Daybell was taking, correct? Do I need to refresh
Yeah.
your recollection with it again? Do you need to
No,
see it again?
I saw it.
You saw it? You sure?
Yes.
So on page 1 of Officer Greenall's report, um, And these are, and the comment was that they're on the table every morning and she takes them to help her. You recall seeing that in Officer Greenow's report?
Yes,
And you discussed that with Officer Greenow, right? You discussed what Tammy Daybell was taking as part of your investigation, didn't you?
yes,
Okay, so you're aware that she was taking fluoxetine, thank you, fluoxetine, which is Prozac.
yes,
She was taking acetaminophen. She was taking ibuprofen, right? Vitality extracts, immunity energy, grapefruit, peppermint. I'm sorry, and I apologize. Vitality extracts for immunity, energy, grapefruit, and peppermint. You saw that as well, right on the table, right?
I recall it was in the cupboard,
Right. You recall that was in the cupboard? That
the
wasn't on
kitchen.
the table?
not the bedside table, the kitchen cupboard.
Well, when Officer Greenow says Chad showed me all of the over-counter medicines she takes, she said she has approximately 10 bottles on the table every morning. So would you be mistaken possibly that Officer Greenow must have made a mistake in her report, or do you possibly, you just don't recall correctly?
Doesn't it say in her report, the cupboard?
Oh, it talks about what was in the cupboard and that there were other things in the cupboard in addition to these things. But Officer Greenow talks about this being on the table. You don't remember that?
There's a picture of those medications in the cupboard in the kitchen.
Okay. And then equate cough medicine, right?
Yes,
Essential oil respiratory blend, right?
yes,
And then lastly, supplement for bruising and sore muscles. Remember that as well?
yes,
And then there is a reference that most of what was in the cupboard were essential oils, natural remedies, and some pain medication. Okay?
yes,
So this cupboard was full of a number of essential oils, right?
yes,
This cupboard was full of natural remedies, correct?
yes,
And this cupboard was included in all of these things as well. A lot of medicine that she was taking, right?
natural, yes,
And there's no doubt in your mind that Tammy Daybell was the one taking all of these medications, right?
that's what we were told, yes.
Okay. And Chad talked to you about Tammy having minor fits and shaking consistent with fatigue, right?
Consistent with syncopal,
Minor fits that were
syncopal episodes.
She had,
Yeah, Mr. Pryor, please let her finish her answer before you get another question going.
you want me to restate?
Yes, please.
You were told that Tamra would have minor fits of shaking, which were consistent with seizures, correct?
Yes,
Now, when you have a seizure, you're aware that you don't need to have a heart condition or a problem with your organs in order to have a seizure, right?
it's in the brain.
Okay. But what in the brain is the seizure? It doesn't necessarily mean you have a sign of it in your brain, do you?
I'm not a doctor, so I don't.
Okay. But you made an assessment here based on what you said, and you signed a death certificate saying that this was something other than homicide or murder, didn't you?
Initially, yes,
Okay. And then her daughter Emma talked about her mother was trying to take clogging classes, but then in the last month or so wasn't able to keep up and was having some difficulty as well, correct?
yes,
Okay. And there was some discussion that Chad was in the temple, and that's part of his faith. I guess we previously talked about a temple, and that's somewhere, I guess, where you practice your religious faith.
yes,
And during that time while in the temple, she fainted while she was kneeling down, right?
yes, when she went to stand up, yes.
Right. And there were other instances where she was having health issues and balance problems as well that were vaguely referenced in the report, right?
Yes,
So based on the fact that she had seizures, based on the fact that those bruises were nothing new or recent, there was nothing on her neck or face that indicated that she was smothered, choked, or anything like that. You made the determination that there was a medical reason for why she passed away, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, that all changed though, right?
yes,
And then at some point, you received a call from some police officers in Arizona, right?
yes,
And they said, hey, we got this situation with Lori Vallow, right?
yes,
And we got another situation with Lori Vallow and Alex Cox related to the name Brandon Boudreaux, right?
yes,
And the first situation was with Charles Vallow, right?
yes.
Did that officer happen to tell you at that time that Chad Daybell isn't implicated or involved in any criminal proceeding um, against either of those folks? Was that told to you at that time?
That, yes, Chad Daybell's name was mentioned with Lori Vallow.
Yeah, but would they happen to tell you that they're not pursuing any charges against Mr. Daybell at that point?
No,
Okay, so that was left out when they talked to you about looking into this thing, right?
yes,
And then at that point, based on your previous observation of foam in the mouth, right?
yes,
And the lividity, right?
yes,
And what those police officers told you when you had your discussion with them, right?
yes,
At that point, you decided maybe I need to look into this thing a little more, right?
yes,
And at that point, you helped with the officers getting an order to exhume Tammy Daybell's body.
yes.
Did you start an inquest per statute into this matter?
I, 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 I can't answer that.
Well, you can, because did you start an inquest? You read the statute. If there's an allegation someone has been murdered, homicide, suicide, you have the option to start a public inquest.
Hold on before you answer. Grounds.
Council should not be interpreting the law at this point, and I don't know if she's able to draw the legal conclusion.
It's a yes or no question, but to the extent it's calling for any legal conclusion, it's sustained.
Okay, well, yes or no? Did you start an inquest?
No. No,
Instead, what you did is you started working with the police officers and the prosecuting attorney on it.
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
At this point, you then notified the police that you wanted her body dug up, right?
at that point, we were working with the FBI and
Okay.
police from different locations,
Oh,
yes.
so the FBI was involved as well, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so.
And at that point, there was an order to have Tammy's body removed from the ground, right?
Yes,
Now, as part of your your duties as a coroner, isn't it true that you're also supposed to notify families in regards to any death or suspicious death and let them know what's proceeding in these matters?
I believe that was done.
It was done?
I believe it was.
Do you know what family members they happened to mention that to, that they were digging their mother out of the ground?
I don't recall which ones, no.
Okay, and it was your duty to do that, so you don't recall your duty of having to notify them that they're digging their mother out of the ground, right?
I work closely with the investigators
Okay,
through the sheriff's office, our detectives, and
and I didn't ask you about what you did with the investigators, ma'am. I asked you whether you told the family you were digging their mother out of the ground.
no,
Was there any other reason you were looking for what, a reason for why Tammy Daybell could have died other than what you said about the lividity or anything else? Was there any other thing, other suspicious circumstances you were looking for?
at the time of her death, no,
And at the time of digging her up, were you looking for something else?
yes.
What were you looking for?
Suspicious activity, anything that would result in homicide.
Okay, and that was after talking to the police, you were looking for information that would help maybe convince you to change your report to something other than natural causes. Is that right?
After several things happened, yes.
Well, I'm not talking about Brandon Boudreaux or Charles Vallow. We've already established what that's all about. I'm talking about the facts you had when Tammy Daybell was put in the ground. It was lividity, and that really was it, wasn't it?
No, I was told about her past health history,
Okay.
and that played into her cause of death, yes.
Did you happen to look at Teton medical report and see what her past medical history was?
I did review it.
Okay.
yes.
So then you're real well aware that Tammy Daybell had a history of anemia, right?
Past history, not current.
Right. Well, she wasn't she wasn't being treated because she wouldn't go to the doctor for anemia. You didn't see any indication that she had been cured of anemia, right?
It just stated her past medical
Right.
history.
And based on your information, there's no indication in any single medical report that, amazingly, Tammy Daybell has been cured of her anemia, right?
No,
Okay. You also saw that she had a family history of heart disease and heart problems as well, right?
family history, yes.
Yeah, family history, right?
Yes,
And you're also aware that Tammy Daybell had a difficulty with going and seeing doctors, correct? She didn't like to see doctors, did she?
correct.
In fact, she relied on homeopathic essential oils and minerals to solve her medical maladies, right?
That's what I was told, yes.
Right. Okay. So based on the other information that you had about Tammy's history, you decided that even though there's anemia and there's a past history of heart disease and heart issues in the family, we were still going to dig her up, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
would you agree with me, ma'am? You were basically going on a fishing expedition looking for a reason to change.
Objection, argumentative, Your Honor.
Sustained.
You were basically looking for some reason to dig Tammy up and try to come up with another cause of death, right?
Objection again, argumentative, Your Honor.
Sustained. Ask a question, please, Mr. Pryor.
After she was dug up and you went into the and had the autopsy done, right? By the way, where was that autopsy done?
In Utah,
Where in Utah?
I don't recall exactly
Okay,
where we were.
but you were in Utah somewhere, right?
Yes,
And Judge, if I could just have a minute.
You may.
That's all I have.
All right, Mr. Wixom, redirect.
If I may, Your Honor.
Mr. Bailiff?
Ma'am, do you recall being asked several questions about what your legal responsibilities are as a coroner by the defense counsel?
yes.
With respect to your duty to perform an investigation, will you please recount what steps you took in your investigation originally at the time of death?
I asked for medical history for Tammy, looked for medications. We also looked in the bedroom, in the nightstand drawers, for anything that would be suspicious. And then Officer Greenhalgh and myself and Deputy Wilmore also spoke with two of our detectives. And Officer Greenhalgh was told just to take some good pictures and document well.
And in fact, pictures were taken, is that correct?
Yes,
Were you present when those pictures were taken?
yes,
Did you provide any instruction as a coroner as to what pictures to take or how to take them?
yes.
Do you recall anything else you did as part of your investigation? Let me ask this. Did you attempt to talk to Garth about the circumstances of his mother's death?
I mostly just talked to Chad and Emma. At the time, Garth was just very quiet and just would nod when we would ask him questions or when Chad would respond. He was just really quiet.
And with respect to a number of the questions,
Mhm.
you continued to tell the jury, that's what I was told. Do you remember responding in that manner?
Yes,
Who was the person on scene that was primarily providing you with all the information that you were relying upon?
Chad Daybell.
And at the time, did Chad bring up any issues about his connection to Lori Vallow?
No,
Did he bring up Alex Cox's name?
no,
Did he bring up the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux?
No.
Defense counsel made clear that you had estimated an approximate time of death, roughly 5 to 6 hours before you arrived on scene. Is that fair?
yes,
Likewise, you were asked questions about finding a number of supplements and other over-the-counter prescriptions on scene.
yes.
Was it even possible for you to ascertain how long those items had been on scene before you got there?
No.
Did you get any other information from Chad to verify that in fact she was taking those supplements and they had been on scene prior to her passing?
I did not.
Do you think it's possible that someone else could have put those supplements on scene before you arrived?
They could have, yes.
You were asked about your duties to provide an accurate death certificate.
Yes,
And in fact, you did file an original death certificate and then a second amended certificate.
yes, correct.
Why did you file the second amended certificate?
The results of the autopsy and 2 other dead children at the same residence.
What other dead children are you referring to?
JJ and Tylee.
Did Chad volunteer any information about those two at
No.
the time?
No,
When you filed the amended certificate, were you doing that as part of your duty as a coroner?
yes, I was.
And explain that. Why? How is that a fulfillment of your duty?
That was the conclusion of the investigation.
You were asked several questions about the bruising that was observed on Tammy's arm.
Yes,
Do you have any qualification as you sit there today to determine the age of bruising?
it looked old to me, but I don't have the expertise.
And in fact, during the autopsy that you observed, did the ME provide any information about that?
Judge, I'm calling, calls for medical conclusion, calls for hearsay, and there's a lack of foundation.
Sustained.
But as you sit there, do you have any reason to think you have the ability to say whether they were old bruises or fresh bruises, you personally?
Me personally, no.
You were asked some questions about your duty to inform family if you feel like there might need to be further investigation and exhumation. Do you remember that question?
Yes.
Why didn't you do that?
I don't recall. I don't.
Do you remember what you told the defense attorney a few moments ago?
Our detectives and officers, I believe they informed the family.
So that was your understanding at the time.
That was my understanding, yes.
Were you ever given any information from law enforcement about how cooperative the family was during the course of the investigation?
Judge, objection.
I just asked Mr. Meek.
They're basing the response on hearsay, and the only way they get that is through hearsay, Judge.
Yeah, the question was she given information? It's eliciting hearsay, Mr. Wixom, it's sustained.
May I argue on that, Judge?
No, I made the ruling, so ask another question.
You indicated that while you were on scene, I think your words were that Chad was sobbing and crying.
Yes.
And is it fair to say that different people have different emotions when there
Yes.
is a grief situation? Were you able to observe or get any information about whether or not a few weeks later when Chad was marrying Lori Vallow, if he was
Judge,
crying or sobbing?
objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Is it fair to say that when you were asking these questions on scene about Tammy's health, that Garth didn't give you any information about her health?
No, he didn't. Only that he was sharing her fluoxetine prescription with his mom.
And again, you've already testified about the reasons for your change in the amended certificate.
Yes.
And that was based upon you being at the autopsy.
Judge asked and answered.
I'm just,
Overruled. Go ahead.
you already explained you attended the autopsy.
Yes, I did.
Is there anything else as you sit there today that you can explain to the jury that you learned from that autopsy experience that helped support your decision to change the death certificate?
The expertise of the medical examiner. And the investigation that was going on. Into other deaths and
Anything further? Anything else? Your Honor, I don't have any further questions.
Judge, there were some new subjects brought up about Alex Cox, Lori Vallow, as well as supplements on the scene and the when those arrived. I think I ought to be allowed to at least inquire on those two subjects.
On the supplements on the scene, I'll allow that. On the other topics, I think that was within the scope
Okay.
of cross. So just on that limited point made by redirect on the supplements, you can recross.
Do you recall about what time the call was made, the 911 call was made?
I don't recall the exact time it was made, no.
But you did say that you dispatched your deputy coroner, Tammy Wilmore, to be there because she could have gotten there within 10 minutes, right?
Correct, yes.
And the purpose for that is that she lives, we're not going to say the town, but she lives close by this residence.
Yes.
And she could get there relatively quickly, correct?
Quicker than me, yes.
So when the dispatch 911 call was made, Miss Wilmore was there within 10 minutes, right?
She was in bed when it happened, so probably not 10 minutes. She had to get dressed and gather her stuff and respond to the scene, yes.
But you were there within 20 minutes. And she
I-
arrived before you got there.
I said approximately.
Yeah. So prosecuting attorneys suggesting that someone ran out and bought a bunch of supplements, staged this thing, and within 10 minutes of Miss Wilmore arriving, planted all of this evidence. That isn't very realistic, is it?
Could have happened before,
Okay. All right. Fair
days
enough.
before.
Fair enough. Thank you, Judge. Nothing else.
All right. That concludes the testimony then of Coroner Dye. Is the state seeking to recall the witness in the future? From the defense?
And Judge, Miss Dye is under subpoena from my office, but I'm releasing her from that subpoena today.
Okay, so that does conclude your testimony for the trial. You can be excused. Thank you for appearing. You can go ahead and step down from the witness box and we'll gather anything that was there in way of exhibits. All right, the state may call its next witness.
Judge, at this time, the state would call Kelsey Harris.
Affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
All right, the court will note the witness is now under oath. I do have a few questions before we start with the examination. Ms. Harris, have you viewed, watched online, or observed any of the trial testimony that's taken place since this case started?
No, I have not.
All right, have you talked to anyone else about the testimony they've given in trial?
No.
Okay. Mr. Wixom, you can proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am. Will you please state your full name for the record?
Kelsey Harris,
Will you please spell it for the reporter?
Kelsie Harris,
And where do you live?
Sugar City.
Is that here in Idaho?
Yes.
Ma'am, do you recall knowing a Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
I want to draw your attention back to October of 2019. Did you have any association or interaction with Ms. Daybell back then?
Yes.
What was that association?
She was a student in my clogging class in Sugar City, and she also worked at the school as a librarian. And at the time, I worked at the school as well.
What did you do at the school at the time?
I worked in the kitchen.
Did you have regular contact while at work with Ms. Daybell?
Yes, I saw her frequently.
Would you, how often during the course of a week or a day might you have? contact?
Every day I would see her.
How would you generally describe your relationship with her?
We were friends. We would see each other at class, in my class and at the school, and have conversation more than just a hello.
Okay. And you mentioned a clogging class. For the sake of jurors or any of us who may not understand clogging, will you explain what that is?
So clogging is a fast-paced style of dance, and you wear clogging shoes that are similar to a tap shoe. It has 2 taps and it creates loud sounds and also different rhythm steps.
And did you say you attended the class with her or you teach the clogging class?
I was the instructor of the class.
To the best that you can you recall what time frame was it that Tammy was attending that class?
It was the end of August, early September until the time of her death in October 2019.
How often was the class held?
It was every week, a 60-minute class once a week.
Did she attend regularly?
Yes, every class.
How would you describe clogging overall? Would it be low intensity, medium intensity, high intensity? Where would you put it?
I would say medium intensity because you're still getting that cardio and getting your heart rate up.
And when students are in the class, do you have the opportunity to observe them?
Yes, I do.
How often do you recall being able to see Tammy in class while she was clogging?
The whole time I'm observing all of the students, making sure there's no falling behind, that they're able to keep up with the steps that I'm teaching. And so I'm constantly watching the students that way.
From your recollection, do you ever recall her falling behind in class?
No,
Do you ever recall any issues with her getting tired?
no,
Any issues at all that you recall with her ability to perform the clogging and keep up with the class?
no.
Now, with respect to any other activities, did you have any other activities that you were involved with, Tammy? In?
I did.
What were those?
So I attended a high fitness class in St. Anthony and I stood right next to Tammy in that class. And that was my first time going. I was not the instructor at the time. I was just a participant and I stood right next to Tammy in that class.
And for the jury's sake, will you just kind of elaborate, what did you do in high fitness class?
So high fitness class is very high intensity. You're doing burpees, a lot of jumping jacks, explosive movements to really get the heart rate up.
And you said you were standing next to her in class?
Yes, I was.
How often was that class held?
2 times a week,
How long was each class?
60-minute class.
Did Tammy, as you recall, attend that regularly?
Yes.
What time frame do you recall attending that class with Tammy relative to her death?
It was about late September of 2019.
And what did you observe, if anything, about Tammy's performance in that class?
Nothing like, so I observed that she was able to keep up in that class and was doing those high intensity moves like the burpees and things like that. And she was able to keep up with that class as well.
And just as a comparison, how different was high fitness than clogging in terms of intensity?
So high fitness is very high intensity. Clogging is still that cardio workout, getting your heart rate up. But as far as like the up and down movements, clogging, we're still moving at a fast pace. And
Thank you. So just based upon your personal observations overall with what you saw in Tammy in those classes and the interactions at school, let me withdraw that and go back. With respect to your interactions at school and at work, did you have any occasion to observe anything that would give you clues about Tammy's health?
no,
So did you withdraw based upon what you observed in clogging and in high fitness? Did you ever see anything that would give you any questions or concerns about how healthy she was?
no,
Did you ever see anything about her struggling or not keeping up?
no, not at all.
Did she ever express any concerns about how she was feeling?
No,
And at these classes, did you talk to her regularly?
I did. Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
All right, thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Would you tell me, again, when did these clogging classes start?
It was the end of August, early September, and they ran every week. And that was the year 2019.
So it was once a week,
Yes,
and let's say you started in September. So there were a total of 5 classes that Tammy attended before she passed away. Would that be fair?
yeah, correct.
5 classes.
Yes,
Okay. And the same thing for the other activity, the high intensity. She only went to one of those though, right?
I could tell she went to more of those. I just attended the one class for my first time.
Well, you don't know whether she attended more. You only saw her at one of those high intensity classes. Isn't that true?
So yes, I did see her.
Okay.
And
Now, I don't want to disparage anybody, but would you describe Tammy's figure as being a body of someone who was extremely fit?
I would say she was a very fit woman.
You'd say she was a very fit woman. Okay.
I would.
Now, you know her daughter Emma, right?
Correct.
And her daughter Emma went to the one high intensity class with her as well, right?
Correct.
And that's the only time you saw Emma and Tammy at the high intensity class that one time, right?
So Emma was a participant as well in my clogging class.
And I'm going to get to that. Emma would stand with her mother at the back of the clogging class and participate in that as well in the very back of the room, right?
Right.
Right. And how many people were in this clogging class?
There were about 7 total.
Okay. And again, if I understand, the clogging classes were twice a week and about the same time, September until Tammy passed in October, right?
Correct. The clogging class was once a week.
Oh, the clogging was once a week? Oh, I'm sorry. I had it down for twice. It was only
The
once a
high
week.
fitness class was twice a week.
Oh, but the high fitness, you only saw her there once. The clogging, you saw her for all 6,
Yes.
5 or 6 of the classes she attended that time, right?
Yes.
And her daughter Emma was there right next to her the whole time, correct?
Correct.
So if there were any issues, you're in the front of the class. If there were any issues with her mother, Emma would probably be the best judge of whether there were issues with her mother and her activity and participation level. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Now you said you worked at the school. You worked in the cafeteria or the food service portion of the
Mhm.
school.
Yes.
Tammy was a librarian. You also know that Emma was teaching at that school as well, right?
Right.
And it was frequent in her usual practice for Emma and her mother to get together every time they had an opportunity to do so, right?
Objection, Your Honor, that assumes facts, not evidence.
Same.
Are you aware that whenever there was any free time during the school hours, that it was always Emma and her mother who would spend the majority of the time together?
Yes.
All right, nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right. Can you recross?
Just a couple of questions, if I may, Your Honor.
Very well. I'm sorry, redirect, Mr. Wixom.
Which may judge. Ma'am, just very quickly, regardless of the cross-examination,
Judge, I'm going to object.
That's argumentative
fair enough.
question.
With respect to the questions that you were just asked, is there any doubt that you have in your assessment of watching Tammy in clogging class and her performance?
There's no doubt. No.
So you are confident in what you've told the
Asked and
jury?
answered.
Overruled.
You are confident in what you've told the jury about your personal observations about Tammy and how she performed?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Any need to recall the witness from the state or the defense?
Not from the defense, Judge.
Not from the state, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. That concludes your testimony in the trial. Thank you for appearing. You may go ahead and step down from the witness box. And you're released from any subpoena. All right, the state can call its next witness.
Judge, at this time, the state would call Shanna Miller.
affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
All right, the witness has been sworn. I'll just have a few questions before we begin with the examination. This trial, Ms. Miller, has been live streamed and publicly available for viewing. Have you observed or watched any of the trial testimony that's taken place?
No, I have not, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Have you discussed with anyone else their testimony they've given in the trial?
No, I have not.
All right, thank you for that affirmation. Mr. Wixom, you may proceed with direct.
Thank you. Good morning, ma'am. Will you please state your full name for the record?
Shanna Miller,
Will you spell it, please?
SHANNAMILLER,
And where do you live?
St. Anthony, Idaho.
And what do you do for work?
I have been retired for the last year and a half, but previous to that, I was a school teacher for 34 years,
What school did you teach at?
Central Elementary in Sugar City.
During your time teaching at Central Elementary, do you recall working with Tammy Daybell?
Yes, I do.
And did you become aware back in October of 2019 that she'd passed?
Yes.
Could you explain to the jury how often and in what way did you interact with Tammy at your work?
I was actually on the committee that interviewed Tammy for a job position at our school back in the spring of, I believe it was 2017. She was hired to be our computer specialist and our librarian. She also helped out with the lunch count, checking the kids in as they went to lunch. So I was her colleague after we hired her. I also attended a high fitness class in St. Anthony with her and her daughter twice a week.
And what was that high fitness class?
It's called High Fit. It's a high intensity workout that lasts an hour. It consists of burpees, jumping jacks, lunges, squats, planks, all set to music.
And how often did you attend that class?
At the time, I was attending twice a week.
Do you recall how often at the time, prior to her death, Tammy was attending the class?
Yes, she and her daughter started attending, I believe it was the spring of 2018, and they attended up until her death in October of 2019.
Were they regular attenders?
Yes,
When they came to class, did you have opportunity to interact with Tammy or observe how she was doing?
yes, I was on the back row, so all I needed to do was look over. Yeah, I had opportunity to observe them.
Would you feel like you had a good vantage point typically?
Yes.
What observations, if any, did you make about Tammy's performance in that class?
Well, it is a very rigorous exercise. It's highly aerobic. And at first, it's hard for anyone that's not in great shape to be able to have the stamina and the strength to be able to complete it. And at first, they weren't able to complete all of the exercises are set to, songs. So they weren't maybe able to do all of the exercises completely correct or finish them, accordingly at first. But as time went on, I would say after the first, I don't know, several weeks, maybe a couple months, they were able to complete the workout.
With respect to, let's narrow it down to the last few months prior to Tammy's death.
Okay.
Were there ever times that you saw Tammy lag behind?
No,
Did she ever stop or take breaks?
no,
Any indication to you that she wasn't keeping up in the class?
no,
Are you confident that based upon your interaction with her at the class and what you could see, that you would have observed that had she fallen back?
no.
You're not confident or?
Oh, sorry. Can you rephrase the question?
Sure.
It's long.
Any reason for you to think that you weren't able to have a good observation of Tammy and assess how she was doing?
Yes, I was I was able to, yes, I would be able to be confident and to say that, yes, I did.
And what about with work? I didn't ask. How often did you interact with Tammy at work?
I would see her probably, I would say every day, sometimes several times a day. Uh, and when I took my kids to library, that was once a week. Computer lab was once a week, maybe twice a week. Can't remember for sure. And then every day as I took my kids into the lunchroom, she'd check the kids off as they came through the lunch line. I would see her then.
Based on observations at work, do you feel like you were able to make any observations about her health or fitness from what you saw at work?
I would say from the time that she started the fitness class, her confidence level in herself, I think her overall image of herself, I think it had improved. She looked like she was in great health and in great shape to me.
And in terms of observing her doing her daily duties at work, did you ever see her get tired or worn out?
No,
What was your reaction when you first learned of Tammy's death?
complete shock
Why is that?
because hours before that, I had seen her at work and she was happy, healthy, conversing with the kids as they, guess the last time I would have seen her would have been, when the kids were going through the lunch line, she was conversing with them, complimenting them, smiling. She seemed perfectly healthy to me.
Thank you. You know, I have no further questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wixom. Cross-examination.
Good morning, Ms. Miller.
Good morning.
So your testimony is that you first started with the interview process of Tammy in the spring of 2017. Is that right?
Mhm.
That means that she would have started her first year in the fall to start as her job as a librarian. Would that be fair?
Of 2017?
Of fall of 2017.
Yes, I
So-
believe that is correct.
Okay, you're not sure though. It could be 2018.
Well, if I did the math correctly, she had worked there she was in her second year of teaching. The second year would have been 2019 to 2020. So that would have been 2018 to 2019, the year that she started working. Yeah,
So 2018, right?
yes, it was
Yeah.
2000.
So when you say 2017, you really didn't know Tammy until the spring when you met her of 2018, correct?
I would have to do the math on that.
Okay.
Still not convinced.
Well, you know, she was in her second year of teaching at the school when she passed, right?
Mhm.
And in the first year of school, that's sort of a probationary period, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And in that probationary period is when they give you the basic benefits, the start benefits that you have to go through as part of your probation, things like life insurance and medical care and all of that. You're given that minimum plan. And then after the first year, that's when you choose to upgrade to add the additional life insurance and death benefits and all that other stuff, right?
Objection, Your Honor, this is outside the scope.
Overruled.
That's when that second year is when you start adding and increasing all of those additional benefits because you've put a year in as your probationary period, right? Ma'am?
I don't know.
Okay, well,
can't
you
answer
worked
that.
there.
Yes, I did for 34 years. That was a long time ago
Okay,
when I
so for
first
30
started working there.
So you're
But
not.
I didn't up my death benefit my second year.
Okay. You do, I'm sorry, you what?
I did not up my death benefit the second year that I
Okay.
taught.
But that's not an uncommon thing to up your death benefit in the second year after you get that eligibility, right?
I couldn't answer that.
Right. And you said 2017, but really it was 2018 when you first met her in the spring, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Okay. And we had a previous witness who talked about these high intensity classes. And you're telling me that these high intensity classes started when?
They started attending, when they started attending or when they started.
When they started?
The instructor's been teaching those high intensity classes for the last at least 6 years, and she was teaching Zumba before that.
Okay. So your testimony is that you met Tammy in the spring of 2018. And ironically enough, that was exactly the time she started these high intensity dance classes at the same time, right? And that's how you became such fast friends, right?
No, I became friends before that at school.
Okay. With Tammy at school?
Mhm.
She wasn't working there.
Well, shortly after she started working there, obviously we became friends.
Okay, and she started working there in the fall of 2018 as the full-time librarian, didn't she?
Yes,
Okay. So isn't it true, ma'am, that the high intensity classes started in September of 2019?
that they started in 2019? No, no, she had been attending for at least 9 months prior to that.
Okay,
Actually, it was more like a year and a half because she had started, I remember she'd started in the spring because her and her daughter had expressed that they wanted to get in shape for a 5K. And
okay,
so some of my coworkers said, well, you should come to High Fit and
okay.
that will help you get in shape. And that would have been in the spring. So she did it that spring and then that fall, then the following spring.
Okay, so in the spring of 2008, when you first met her, uh, basically what happened in the very first spring when you were interviewing her, she signs up for High Fitness. She decides she's going to do a 5K. She's going to do all of these
No,
things.
no,
Ma'am,
we
let me
hired
finish
her.
My question,
Well,
please.
Mr. Pryor, problem is it's argumentative, so just ask a question, please.
I didn't hear an objection from the prosecutor, Judge.
I know, but in fairness, it's in the long line of argument that she started responding. So just please go with questioning on cross.
And you would agree with me that Emma was there for all of the times that Tammy was involved in that class. Would that be fair?
I believe so.
Okay, so Emma was standing next to her the entire time, right?
They worked out next to each other.
Okay. And did you watch Tammy the entire time that you participated in these high intensity exercises?
Off and on. I mean, you're always looking around, seeing, what everybody else is doing, if they're following the instructor.
And how many participants were in these high intensity exercise classes?
Uh, It would depend. There could be as few as 15, as many as upwards of 24 to 30, depending on the night.
Do you know Kelsey Harris?
Yes,
Okay. Friend of yours?
no, well, coworker, colleague,
Okay. You don't go to any classes with her, right?
no.
Okay. So how would you evaluate, if you were to make a determination, would you say that Tammy Daybell was very fit?
Yes,
So she had a low body fat, she had a petite figure, is that what you're telling me?
you don't have to have a low body fat or a petite figure to be highly fit, but what I observed is that she had the stamina from the time she started to the fall that she passed. She had the stamina to be able to complete those rigorous
Okay,
workouts.
okay. Judge, I have nothing else. Thank you.
Redirect, Mr. Wixon.
No, Your Honor, we would excuse the witness.
All right, that concludes your testimony. Thank you very much for appearing today. Released from any subpoena, and I'll ask the state if they've got another witness to call.
We do, Your Honor. At this time, we would call Jennifer Geisler.
I'm sorry, Judge, I missed the name.
Jennifer Geisler.
I swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth.
All right, good morning, Ms. Geisler. Before we commence with examination by the state, I just have a few questions now that you've been placed under oath. This trial has been broadcast on a court YouTube channel and publicly available to view. Have you observed any of the trial testimony since the case began?
I have not.
Okay, have you discussed with anyone else the testimony they've been in the trial?
I have not.
Okay, thanks for your responses. Mr. Wixom, you can inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, will you please state your full name for the record?
Yep, Jennifer C. Geisler,
Will you please spell that?
Jennifer
Thank you. And where do you live?
I live in St. Anthony.
And where do you work?
I work at Central Elementary.
What is your job there?
I'm a first grade teacher. Yep, first grade.
How long have you worked at the elementary school?
It's been about 26 years.
I want to draw your attention back to the summer and fall of 2019. Do you remember working with Tammy Daybell?
I do.
Can you explain to the jury, well, first, did you have interactions with Tammy at work?
I did. She was our librarian.
Could you please explain to the jury how often or frequently you interacted with her and what capacity?
I would probably see her at least every day going back and forth in the hall. I took my class to library once a week. And so it's stop and talk. Frequently, probably about 2 to 3 times a week, I ate lunch with her. Our first grade team eats lunch first and we go into the lunchroom, our teacher workroom, and Tammy usually would come in and eat with us.
How would you describe your relationship with Tammy just overall?
Just friends. We were good friends.
And while working with her, what did you observe about her personality overall?
She was just super friendly, always bubbly, happy. She was a person that you would like to be around.
Was that the case in the late summer, early fall of 2019 before she passed?
Yeah. Yep.
And did you ever do anything or associate with Tammy outside of school?
I did.
What did you do?
So she came to, it was a high fitness class that we had up in St. Anthony, and twice a week I had invited her and Emma to come up and give it a try. And they came up and joined us. It's about an hour twice a week at night. And so they came up and exercised with us.
Was she regularly attending the class after you invited her?
She did,
Did she come both classes each week?
most often.
When she was in class with you, did you have any opportunity to observe how she was doing in class?
So most of the time I was up in the front row. Tammy and Emma are in the back row. So I didn't get to see them through every song, but some of the songs you turn around and you can see. They were always funny and giggly back there and would sometimes add their own moves into the songs with them. And then at the end of the class, my sister and I go back and we kind of check everybody out. I punch her base cards. And so as they come through, could talk to Tammy and Emma as they came through.
Did Tammy ever make any comments about how she was doing in class?
She loved it. She always thought it was just fun.
Did you observe how she was performing? Did she seem to be keeping up in the class?
Yeah, she did. Like when they come through, usually when you finish, you're pretty sweaty. And as she came through, she was as sweaty as everybody else.
Do you recall ever seeing any times where she had to take a break or got short of breath, anything like that?
Not that I recall.
When was the last time that you personally recall interacting with Tammy?
It was the Friday right before she died.
What was that interaction that you had with her?
I ate lunch across the table from her.
And what observations, if any, did you have of her health that day?
Just like a normal day. She was healthy, happy, talkative. She was sitting by her son, Seth. He was substituting that day. And just a normal day.
What was your reaction when you had learned that she passed?
I was super surprised
Why?
that she had passed
Why?
because she was just so healthy just the day before, and I was just talking to her.
And then last question, based upon what you observed, do you think you had enough opportunity to see Tammy in class and how her performance to have a fair assessment of how she was doing?
I do.
So had she fallen back or gotten tired, do you believe that you would have seen that?
Yeah.
How far away were you from her in the class typically?
You know, I'm terrible at distance. I was like, she's probably 3 rows back. And it's just in their small little elementary gym.
Do you feel like you could see her well?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right. Cross-examination.
Good morning.
Good morning.
About what time did Tammy and Emma sign up for the Zumba class?
Mhm. I don't remember the exact day.
Okay. Do you remember talking to Officer Mattingly about that?
I do.
Okay. Would it surprise you to learn that you told Officer Mattingly that Tammy had been in the Zumba class for around 4 months?
Yes, I think I did.
About what you said?
That's about what I said.
Okay. You also told Officer Mattingly that you didn't know whether Tammy was doing the high workout or the low intensity workout. Remember telling him that as well?
I remember telling him I didn't get to see her with every song, but as I turned, you could look back that way.
Okay. And you were in the front row, right?
I am.
And Tammy was in the back row.
Yes.
So in order to see Tammy, you would have had to purposely turn around and observe her, right?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, Emma was at every single one of the classes with her mother, correct?
Yes, she would come with her mom.
Now, you first met Tammy when?
When she started teaching or was our librarian hired at our school,
2018?
if that's when. I can't remember when she was hired.
Okay. You mentioned that you guys were such good friends. You never went over to her house, though, did you?
No, just like school friends.
Oh, school friends. So you would just talk periodically during the day, right?
Right.
And teachers are busy. They have to take care of their students, correct?
Yep. We have our downtime at lunch.
Right. But the reality is that most of the downtime at lunch, it was Tammy and Emma who were spending their time together at almost every lunch. Do you recall that?
So Tammy would come in and sit with us to eat. Emma taught 3rd grade, and so her lunch was a little bit later in the day.
But they would spend time during the lunch hour together, right?
Possibly, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Judge, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Redirect?
May I have just a couple of questions?
Yes.
Thank you. Ma'am, just to be clear, are Zumba and high fitness class the same class?
So that's, I was checking because I had talked to him before about Zumba. When I had asked Chrissy just before, how long have we been doing high fit? And she had clarified that we've been doing it for 6 years. And so it was more high fit when Emma and Tammy started coming. High fit is more intense. You got lots of jumping jacks and burpees and tuck jumps, and it's a lot more physical workout than Zumba. Zumba's a little bit more dancey.
I think you just were asked some questions about eating lunch with Tammy. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have the opportunity to observe what kinds of food she ate or how healthy her eating was?
Yes, because if I followed her through the lunch line, I always commented she took all the vegetables. I would usually follow through and skip the vegetables and take the cookies and stuff. And I had commented to her that she eats super healthy. I wish I ate as healthy as she did.
During that last several months before she passed, did you ever observe her to gain or lose any weight?
Judge, this is going beyond scope.
As sustained.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Any recross?
If the court tells me where they're going to allow me to go on recross, I will.
Just on those very first comments about her testimony.
So I also must have misunderstood. So the high fitness is one class, correct?
Yes.
When did Tammy start doing the high fitness class?
So it was the same. I had just mentioned before when they had asked me that I had said it was Zumba. We had started out doing Zumba a long time ago, and then our teacher, Chrissy, has turned it into a high fit class.
Oh, so it was all the same
So it's
class.
all been high, not all the same. It went from Zumba, right? And then we stopped and then went into a high fit
Okay,
and had been doing that for a while before Tammy and Emma joined in.
so
So instead of Zumba, they were doing a high fit.
that was about 4 months of that, right?
Yes, and probably longer. I don't remember, recall exactly when they started.
So it could have been a little longer, could have been a little shorter.
Not shorter, but it could have been longer
Oh, how do you know that it wasn't shorter?
because I knew they were coming longer than 4 months.
Okay. Okay, Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes the testimony then of this witness. Is she permitted to be released from any subpoena?
From the defense, yes.
From the
Okay.
state as well, Your Honor.
All right, you're released from your subpoena. Thank you for appearing, and you may be excused.
Ingrid. Ingrid.
You want to get into another witness, or do you want to take the lunch recess?
Your Honor, the next witness will be a little more lengthy, and so I think we would probably end up at a weird stopping point. So we would request that we maybe just break 10 minutes early.
Okay,
That would be my request as well, Judge.
I'm fine with that. We'll go ahead and take the noon recess. We'll go ahead and be in recess, and let's try and resume with additional testimony right at 1 o'clock.
All right, please.
And I did just one thing. The other one I emailed you just has one change.
Okay, folks, thank you very much.